Hello, Farah. Hi, John. Tony, how are you doing today? Doing really well. You will need microphones for this. It will be very helpful. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot of shouting, and I don't want you losing your voices. We need them for good. For those people who know a little bit less about you and the work that you do, Farah, maybe you can start. Can you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing? Because there's multiple levels to it.
Yes, thank you. So I have been active in the ocean space for the last 20 years. My passion goes back to when I was a small kid. And I've had the good fortune and privilege to spend a lot of time at sea, on the high seas, with coastal communities around the world. And so in the past 20 years, I've really worked on a broad range of issues from overfishing and destructive fishing, fish crimes at sea, protected areas, and so on. Now I run a nonprofit called Women for Oceans, and that is focused on ocean health, obviously, but we try to really insert the feminine perspective into the negotiations that are happening, into the solutions that we have, so that we can really tap into our diversity and into the full spectrum of what it means to be human, and also to rediscover our place in the natural world, which is really important if we're going to turn things around. And yeah, over the years, as I said, spending a lot of time at sea, I've seen some of the most beautiful places in the world's oceans, but also some of the most egregious practices happening at sea. And so it really is my life mission to help protect the ocean for us and all the beings that we share this planet with.
And it's an absolute honor, honestly, to have you here with the breadth of knowledge that you have. Tony, you and oceans go a long way back. Tell us a bit about the work that you do and your connection to the ocean.
So my connection to the ocean started at the age of 17 when I joined the Navy. Joined the British Navy, spent almost 30 years serving with the British Navy around the world, sailed into every ocean, touched pretty much, certainly every continent and maybe 50 different countries. But what was kind of clear to me, that there were some challenges out there that were not going to be resolved just by having a high-tech vessel, and we needed some other solutions. So I had the opportunity to move on from the Navy, join the NGO world, first at the Pew Charitable Trust, but now with Global Fishing Watch. And Global Fishing Watch is a really nice fit because it brings all of my experience from my time out at sea, looking for things that just didn't want to be found, basically, and that's what we need to do now, is shine a light on those things that people are just not aware of. So using artificial intelligence, big data, we're bringing together an awful lot of information. We call them insights. We turn the data into insights in order that everybody can have access to this platform for free, globally, equitable access, so we can start to really understand what's happening out on our ocean.
So, two people brilliantly placed to answer questions about what's going on in the oceans and what we need to do about it. This session here is very much about making the invisible visible. Farah, having brought together over 35 different ocean specialities in your book, The Ocean and Us, what are some of the lesser-known impacts that humans are having on our oceans?
Sure. I mean, we've all heard, especially in the previous presentation, overfishing, pollution, climate change are affecting our oceans. And, what does climate change mean on the ocean? It means that the ocean is acidifying, it's warming, the oxygen content is reducing, and all of this is having impacts on life in the ocean. But also just our everyday lives. A lot of us, even when we don't live by the sea or don't spend much time in the ocean, don't realize that that what we do affects the ocean. So, for example, the choices we make in our purchasing behavior, most goods are shipped around the ocean, and shipping has a huge impact on life in the ocean. But also things like the aquarium trade or the marine animal welfare. We kill trillions of fish every year for seafood consumption, and it's done in the most barbaric way. But people don't realize that. I was just discussing yesterday with a friend that if you're in a restaurant, you don't order a meat burger, you order a beef burger. And with fish, we just say fish burger. We have no clue, really, what's in the food that we eat. And so there's this real disconnect between us and the ocean. And with the book, I really try to explore all the ways that our lives interact with the ocean. And I think we're going to come to it, but one of the one of the things I also try to explore is what are the future impacts that we will have on the ocean. The high seas, for example, are, well, we're going to come to that as well, but it's most of the ocean. And as we look into the next 50, 70, 80 years, how are we going to occupy that space? Are we going to be living on the ocean? Are we going to be living under the waves? Because as our population grows, as our land disappears due to sea level rise, we're going to have a new relationship with the ocean. And also, an emerging threat that's coming up is deep sea mining, and I think we'll come to that as well. But that's a new threat that's happening to the ocean on the high seas as well. And that is basically going to take place in the deep sea and destroy deep sea habitats irreversibly, disturb locked away carbon. And so these are things that we as land animals are not fully aware because we don't know, we don't understand our relationship with the ocean. Most of us don't. And so that's really what I try to do, is to try to bring forward all those challenges that we have and all the ways our lives impact the ocean.
Well, I'm glad you put it in a book, because it sounds like there's lots of them, and I don't think we'd have time to go into all of them in great detail. So it's good to know there's a resource that we can go back to. Tony, fishing is one of the largest activities that we do out at sea, and overfishing is something that we generally know and hear about in terms of its impact. What other impacts should we be thinking about when it comes to fisheries and biodiversity?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I'll mention probably just three, but as highlighted, what's happening out there is out of sight and out of mind. So how do we bring this to you all to make you understand exactly what is happening and what might be done about it? We talk about destructive fishing. And what is destructive fishing? Things like trawling. You saw the images from Ghislaine earlier about how we're tearing up the seabed, ripping apart the very land that the sea forests are growing on, whether it be coral, seagrass meadows. Seagrass meadows are really important when it comes to climate change. They sequester CO2. And basically, it takes a long time for those areas to regenerate. So the people that are generally needing to draw on that resources are finding that their resources are in decline. So destructive fishing is something that has to be focused on, and it's generally very localized. Bycatch. Europeans, we're always looking, and I say we, I know I'm British, but I class myself as European. Europeans.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, the bycatch situations, the fact that there are fish being caught that are not the targeted species, and what happens then. We've got to reduce the bycatch, but strangely there's some perverse things happening. So if you go to Ghana, there's a group called Environmental Justice Foundation. Take a look at their website. They're looking at an activity that they call SEICO. So the fishermen there normally go out there, do their job, find their fish, bring it home for their families, etc. But the industrial trawlers have started to have a bycatch of the sardinella and anchovy. And they've started to sell it to the local fishermen. And it became such a lucrative trade that they're now deliberately targeting that bycatch. And there are now fishermen leaving the local villages that don't even go to sea with a net. They just go straight to the industrial vessels and buy that bycatch from them. And that is a destructive practice that is breaking the economic situation in Ghana. So that sort of activity has got to stop. And then let's link it back into climate. If we're setting up marine protected areas around the world, we need 30% of the ocean, the right 30% of the ocean to be protected by 2030. If we're going to put a protection in place across the right vital critical habitats, then we have to be able to protect it. And that's one of the major issues, is that we're really struggling to enforce and understand what's happening out there, because if we protect the right areas but then fail to enforce or stop the damage, then they're not going to have the impact that we need.
So many different things to consider. I'm going to add another dimension to that consideration, which is often when we think about oceans, what we're easily able to wrap our head around is coastlines. We can think of beaches and what's happening on the coastlines and coral reefs. That kind of feels easy. But the oceans are vast. And so we have these deep areas that we kind of forget about, like all the way out there. Tony, when it comes to like deep sea fishing, are there different problems there? You spoke about Ghana, and that felt like it's closer to the coastline, but as we go further out into deeper waters, are the challenges that we're facing with the oceans different?
Oh, there's huge challenges. I mean, the size and scale of the ocean is, as you've said, vast. I mean, I think it's 4 times as much activity happening out there as the same agricultural activity. How on earth do you watch 2/3 of the planet at the level that you can really understand and then take some action? So we might be able to see bad behavior, but if there's no patrol boats there, what do you do about it? You know, we've got to connect the facts of what we know is happening about where we can do it. We're humans. We're sort of limited in our capacity to degree. So when a vessel comes back into port, in the same way as when I travel, if I go to America, I have to show my passport, my visa, I have to have a reason to be there, money in my pocket, a return flight even. They need, you know, they are asking me some basic questions that we're not asking fishermen around the world. We need to reverse the burden. So whatever they're doing out at sea, far, far from where you all can see just from the beach, we need to be able to ask those questions of the fishermen that are coming in to say, well, why did you disappear very close to that marine protected area? We couldn't see you on any of the tracking systems. And they should have to evidence why that is. And if they can't, they should not land their fish. And that will change behavior. It will also deter bad behavior, because those that are getting away with it at the moment because the system is patchy and lax will have to stop. So there would be a big system change.
So we need better eyes and we need some sort of way of being able to say, we need you to account for the activities that you were doing whilst you were way out in the vast ocean. Farah, I know deep sea mining is one of those things that really gets your goat. Tell us a little bit more about why is this such a big problem?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, just coming back to the vastness of the ocean, right? So most of the ocean is the high seas, right? That almost half of our planet are actually defined as the high seas. This means that these are areas beyond national jurisdiction. No single country has the jurisdiction to single-handedly or to control activities there. There are a patchwork of treaties and conventions that try to manage some of the activities like fishing, but there's no comprehensive management regime out on the high seas. And this is what scares me the most, because it means that whatever we do on the high seas, there is little to no accountability, right? So if you commit a crime in your own national waters or on land or whatever, you can be taken to court, you can be held to account in your country. But on the high seas, it requires political will. It requires, first of all, as Tony says, we need to identify or, catch people red-handed committing a crime. And then we have to find a country that will use their political clout, if you like, to hold the beneficiary of that activity, the country who's, who the vessel is flagged to, or in the case of mining, whoever the company is, which country it belongs to, that a country has to take that another country to court. And that's not going to happen. In my experience, spending time on the high seas, watching illegal fishing happening on the high seas, I was unable to get, even though we had all the documentation, all the evidence, I was unable to get a country to hold another country to account on those matters. And so deep sea mining, just also to give you a little bit of background about that, is an emerging industry. It doesn't happen yet on the high seas, but there's this mad rush to open up the deep sea to mining in the name of the transition economy. For minerals to power our electric batteries and so on. First of all, that argument is flawed, and I'm happy to talk to any of you afterwards about why that is. We have enough minerals on land. Our battery technology is changing and not requiring these scarce and expensive metals. And also, we can do much better in terms of recovering metals from our waste streams to insert back into our supply chains. So, but why does it matter that we mine in the deep sea? The deep sea, we're talking about 4 to 6 kilometers deep. This area is very undiscovered to date. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do the deep sea. But what we do know is that life in the deep ocean is very slow growing. There are fish there that reach several hundred, 150 to 200 years old. Sharks, 400 years old. There's corals that can reach several thousand years old. And as you heard in the previous presentation, there are more coral species in the deep ocean than in the shallow waters. But most importantly, if we look at the deep sea, it is also our biggest carbon stores. It's our biggest there's all this carbon that's locked away in the seabed, and if we're going to start mining that, we are potentially re-releasing that carbon back into the water column with all the consequences that come with that. So in the midst of a biodiversity crisis and a climate crisis, we really shouldn't be embarking on a new crisis that is going to exacerbate both the biodiversity crisis, because we're going to wipe away species that will not return on human lifespans, and we're going to be disturbing locked away carbon. And it's an experiment we simply can't afford to carry out.
I'm loving the passion, and as much as it's so important, thank you so much. It is so important that we understand what the issues are and how we've got here. I also know that there are solutions. Now, they may be in their infancy, but there are solutions out there. And Tony, I know you're doing a lot of work in terms of technology, especially in the fisheries space. What is the role? Is there a role for technology to play in terms of how we solve some of these problems we at least know about now and that have been made more visible to people today?
Well, of course, technology works both ways. The technology is what's given the fishing fleets the ability to go further afield, fish deeper, harder, longer than ever before. And in the last 50 years, we've seen significant decline in those fisheries. You talked about overfishing earlier. So there's one element of technology that is driving what would be described as bad behavior. But that same behavior can be properly regulated and managed if we use appropriate technologies to empower that. I think most people these days are using mobile phones, computer, everyone's connected all of the time. That access to information is what we've got to harness. Everyone says this all the time, but the reality is we have to communicate more clearly about what is happening. So, in my last answer, in the sense of the challenges out there, the transparency, as we tend to refer to it, the transparency of information, the transparency of data, the transparency of activity is what's going to unlock something that's scalable, globally applicable, and actually, it comes down to it all the time, affordable. If we want to use technology to monitor the whole ocean, and we want to give it to private companies to do, it will be unaffordable, and it will also be patchy, because no one company will share with another company that they're rivals for profit. And actually, there is very little profit in the fisheries industry when it comes to the monitoring and control, the countries that need to look after it. So actually, very few companies are really very interested in doing this for the holistic good. So that's where I think transparency comes in, and systems like Global Fishing Watch. And the other element of it is collaboration. I don't think any one solution fixes enough of the problem. So you have to be able to work out what your system can't do and find appropriate partnerships to fill those gaps. And that's part of Global Fishing Watch's world. We make sure that any gaps in our technology are filled by other partners in order to give a whole and full answer to the problem. So the sum of the parts, the sum of the parts is much greater than the actual sum itself. I always forget that one.
Oh, I can't remember it myself. I'm trying to fill it in for you, Tony.
You get more. You get much more for your money if you work together. And you innovators out there, you're learning from everybody here in how your solutions can come together. Machine learning. I can only train my data to do something if I have the training data. Otherwise, it will be biased in some way or might have an ethical issue with it. So we've got to be careful how we use it. And if we work together, we can probably get much more from the technology.
So a collaborative approach that drives transparency can see technology be a force for good. Farah, your book looks at a lot of solutions. Can you maybe share one or two of some of the creative, innovative solutions that you're seeing out there?
Well, I mean, the book has 32 informative and inspiring chapters covering a whole host of issues, but there are a lot of common solutions across the different issues. And like I said before, it's from your purchasing behavior, but it's also how you vote, for example. But the most important sort of thread that came through all the sort of advice from these specialists is you don't need to be an expert to help save the ocean. You can inform yourself, you can inspire others around you, you can share whatever knowledge you have, you can support organizations. These are ways that you really can help the ocean. For example, last month I submitted a petition with over 340,000 signatures to the Dutch Parliament calling on the Dutch government to say no to deep sea mining. And that's only possible because so many of you signed that petition. So really understand and know your agency. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you know, whatever skill you have, you can apply it to helping the ocean, and for that matter, any part of the world, and all the issues that we face. So it's, every chapter of the book has a list of things you can do to really help address that issue. It's too many to name here, but I do have a couple of copies of the book, so The Ocean and Us, with me, so if you want to catch me afterwards, I can show that to you, yeah.
I would absolutely love to talk to both of you for a lot longer. I absolutely would. Have they not been brilliant? However amount of time. So really quickly, for people who want to learn more, find out more, connect with you deeply, Tony, what's the best way to do that?
Well, use the technology, get out there, look at websites like Bloom, we saw some photos from there, Environmental Justice Foundation, Oceana, WWF, Global Fishing Watch. There's lots of information placed right out there, and the deeper dive behind the facts that are in the headlines there. You need to understand more, and then start to ask questions of your members of parliament, your representatives, and make sure they understand that the ocean is important to you, and that if they want your vote, they have to act.
Brilliant. Farah, how do people stay connected?
Read The Ocean and Us. No, but seriously, you know, the ocean gives us life. It provides us the oxygen we breathe. It regulates our climate. So just knowing that will help everyone care about our ocean, because we need the ocean more than the ocean needs us. Yeah. And stay hopeful.
Thank you both so much. You provided us with a huge amount of hope. It's John and Farah. Give them a warm round of applause.